students, welcome to Sunil's tutorial. I'm Sunil Mirwani and today we'll be doing this chapter called as nervous coordination. Now, here I've put up a diagram of human brain. Let's see the central nervous system and let's talk about human brain. Right? Now, what is the human brain? Human brain is an organ of the central nervous system which is well protected within the cranium and the three meninges along with cerebrospinal fluid. It has cavities which are called as ventricles. Now the cranium and the meninges are with the cerebrospinal fluid protect the brain from mechanical shock. Now if you look at the brain, the brain is divided into three main parts and its subparts are the forebrain. You have the forebrain which is made up of the cerebrum. It is also made up of the diencephalon. Then you have midbrain which is made up of corpora quadrigemia, and it is made up of hindbrain which is made up of cerebellum, pons varolii and medulla oblongata. So those are the different parts of the brain. Okay, so we have the forebrain which is made up of cerebrum with a pair of olfactories. So this area here should be your cerebrum, right? Then you have which also has diencephalon, which has the thalamus and the hypothalamus, right? So the thalamus as well as hypothalamus are in the forebrain only. Then you have the midbrain which is made up of corpora. It is made up of corpora quadrigemia. Should be somewhere here. Here. This part. Right? And then you have the hindbrain which is made up of cerebellum, pons varolii and medulla oblongata. This is cerebellum, pons varolii and medulla oblongata. So this part is your hindbrain. Okay? Let's write this much down first. I can say that the brain is an organ of the central nervous system. Brain is an organ of central nervous system and which is well protected, within cranium and three meninges along with cerebrospinal fluid. Fine. It has cavities which are called as ventricles. It has cavities called ventricles. Right? The cranium and the meninges from the cranium meninges along with cerebrospinal fluid protect the brain from mechanical shock. Cranium and meninges with cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid protect the brain protect the brain from mechanical shocks. Right? The brain is divided into three main parts: brain is divided into three main parts, right? They are the forebrain, the forebrain is also called as prosencephalon, right? The forebrain or the prosencephalon is made up of cerebrum, with a pair of olfactory lobes, and diencephalon, that is your thalamus, which is made up of thalamus and hypothalamus. So that is your forebrain. Then you have, second is the midbrain. The midbrain is made up of corpora, quadrigemini, corpora quadrigemini, right? Which is here. That's your midbrain, right? And then you have hindbrain. Hindbrain is made up of cerebellum. Hindbrain is made up of cerebellum, pons varolii, and medulla oblongata. Right? So those are your parts of the brain. Right? Now let's see each part in detail, guys. Let's try to see each part in detail. First, let's see the forebrain. Right? Now, the forebrain, as we said, is made up of cerebrum. The cerebrum is also called as telencephalon. Okay, now let's see this. Now, the cerebrum is the largest part of the brain and is made up of two right and left cerebral hemispheres. I'll show you a diagram a little later where I'll show you the top view where you will be able to see the right and the left hemisphere. Now, each with a cavity called as parasoid, right? So both the right and the left part of the brain have a cavity which is called as parasoid, which is a characteristic of the mammalian brain. Now these cavities are also called as first and second ventricles. Now both the hemispheres are joined by corpus callosum. You would have both the hemispheres which are going to be joined by corpus callosum. Fine. Okay, here you have the two hemispheres which are joined by corpus callosum. Next, now the outer surface of the cerebrum is made up of cerebral cortex, which is made up of nerve cells. Now the nerve cells are also referred to as grey matter, while the inner part of the cerebrum is made up of cerebral medulla, is called as the cerebral medulla, and which is made up of nerve fibers, which is called as white matter. Now the cerebral cortex is highly folded to form ridges and depression. The ridges are called as gyri and the depression are called as sulci. The gyri increase the surface area of the cerebral cortex. So these are those depressions and these are those ridges, right? Now there are three deep sulcis which divide the cerebral hemispheres into four lobes, right? Now amongst the three ridges that you have the central sulcus, then you have the lateral sulcus, and then you have the parieto-occipital sulcus. So here you have the central sulcus, this is one of them. Then you have the lateral sulcus, and then you have the parieto-occipital sulcus, right? These are those three sulcis that divide the brain into three hemispheres. Now you also have four lobes in the brain. Those are your anterior frontal lobe, the middle parietal lobe, the posterior occipital lobe, and the lateral temporal lobe. So you have the frontal lobe here, then you have the middle lobe, that's middle parietal lobe, here's your middle parietal lobe, then you have the posterior occipital lobe, and you have the lateral temporal lobe. So the cerebrum is divided into four parts, fine? Now, there are sensory areas in the cerebrum. The sensory areas of touch and pain, motor areas, speech areas, smell, taste, auditory and visual areas, all of them are located in the cerebrum. Cerebrum controls all voluntary activities. It responds to heat, cold, pain, touch, taste, light, pressure. It has strong control over laughing, weeping and emotions. It is your seat of consciousness. It is the seat of highest mental faculties like memory. Your entire memory is located here. Intelligence, thinking, reasoning, learning and speech. All of them are located here. Fine, do we get this thing clear? So we'll just go through cerebrum once again. Guys, cerebrum, it is the largest part of the brain. It is divided into two parts, the right and the left part. Now each part has a cavity which is called as parasoil. These cavities are also referred to first and second cavity, right? Both of them are joined together. The two hemispheres are joined together by corpus callosum. This is your corpus callosum that joins the two hemispheres. The outer surface of cerebrum is made up of cerebral cortex, which is made up of nerve cells. It is called as cerebral cortex and it is made up of nerve cells, whereas the inner matter is called, or the inner part of the cerebrum is called as cerebral medulla, and it is made up of nerve fibers. The cerebral cortex is highly folded and forms ridges and depression. The ridges are called as gyri, the depressions are called as sulci. Gyri, these are your ridges and these are your depressions. Okay. Gyri increase the surface area of the cerebral cortex. There are three deep sulcis, 1, 2 and 3. These are your three deep sulcis that you have, right? They are called as the central sulci, the lateral sulci and the parieto-occipital sulci, right? They divide the cerebrum into four lobes: the frontal lobe, the anterior frontal lobe, the middle parietal lobe, the posterior occipital lobe, which is here, and the lateral temporal lobe, right? All your sensory areas are located here, and it controls all voluntary activities. Fine, do we get this thing clear? Okay, let's write this much down before we move ahead. Cerebrum. It is the largest part of the brain. It is the largest part of the brain and is made up of two, left and right, and is largest part of the brain, made of two left and right, two hemispheres. Right? Each with a cavity called parasoid. Right? Now, these cavities are also called first and second ventricles. Okay. So it is the largest part of the brain, made up of two hemispheres. Each hemisphere has a cavity which is called as parasoid. These cavities are also called as first and second ventricle. Right? Next, I can say both the hemispheres are joined by corpus callosum. Right? Now, the outer surface of cerebrum is called cerebral cortex, and is made up of nerve cells. It's called cerebral cortex, made up of nerve cells, and which is also called as the grey matter. Right? While the inner part of the cerebrum, is called cerebral medulla. And is made up of nerve fibers. Which is your white matter. Right? The cerebral cortex is highly folded. To form ridges, that's your gyri, and depressions, that's your sulci. Right? Gyri increase the surface area of cerebral cortex. Gyri increase the surface area of cerebral cortex. Right? There are three deep sulcis. Which divide each cerebral hemisphere. Into four lobes. Right? The three deep sulcis are A, the central sulcus, then you have the lateral sulcus, and third you have the parieto-occipital sulcus. Right? Now, the four lobes are the anterior frontal lobe, then you have the middle parietal lobe, then you have the posterior occipital lobe, and you have the lateral temporal lobe. So those are the four lobes in which the cerebrum is divided, right? It has the sensory areas of cerebrum. Sensory areas of cerebrum are you have first the sensory areas for touch and pain, then you have motor areas, then you have motor speech areas, then you have smell area, then you have taste area, auditory area, and the visual area. These are the various areas that are located in the cerebrum, right? Functions of cerebrum. Functions. It controls all voluntary activities. It controls all voluntary activities. Then it responds to stimuli, that is, it responds to heat, cold, pain, touch, taste, light, pressure, etc. It has strong control over laughing, weeping, and all your emotions. It is the seat of consciousness. It is the seat of consciousness. Right? It is the seat of highest mental faculties. It is a seat of highest mental faculties. Right? It is the seat of highest mental faculties. Then that is your memory, intelligence, thinking, reasoning, learning, and speech. All of them are located there. Right? So I'll just show you those diagrams for all the different areas. Now we can see the three Sulcis very clearly in this particular diagram, and we can also see the different areas in this. And then we can see the hemispheres here. Let's see this. We can see all the three sulcis here. You have the central sulcus, then you have the lateral sulcus here, and you have the parieto-occipital sulcus. Sorry. Then you have the different areas. You have the speech area that is located here, and then you have the visual area which is in the occipital lobe. You have the sensory speech areas which is in the middle lobe, that is your lateral lobe, and in the frontal lobe you have the motor speech area. Auditory area is also in the lateral lobe. Here in this diagram you can see that the brain, these are the two hemispheres, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. Fine. From here you can see the medulla oblongata. This is your ventral side view of the brain. Fine. So those are the various areas that you have in the brain, and that's how the brain is divided into four lobes. This is your frontal area, then this is your occipital area, right? This is your lateral area, fine, and parietal lobe I've shown you, anterior, that is your anterior lobe. We also did the parietal lobe. Here is the parietal lobe. Then you have the posterior occipital lobe. This is the parietal, this is the occipital lobe, right? So frontal, parietal, occipital and lateral. Four lobes are here. Fine. So, and what are the sensory areas located in each one of them? You can see that in the frontal lobe you have the premotor areas, the motor areas and the motor speech areas. In the parietal lobe you have the sensory area and the sensory speech area. In the occipital lobe you have the visual areas located, and in the lateral lobe you have the auditory areas located. The taste area is located in your parietal lobe. Fine. So those are your different areas which are located in different lobes, and this is your ventral side view to show the two hemispheres. This is one of them, this is the other hemisphere, right? Now in this next diagram what we see is, we see the olfactory lobes, right? We said that the brain is made up of, the forebrain is made up of cerebrum, and the cerebrum is made up, the forebrain is made up of cerebrum along with a pair of olfactory lobes. Now this is what I wanted to show you in this particular diagram. The pair of olfactory lobes are incorporated in the cerebrum on the ventral side. That's your ventral side diagram that I'm showing you. Each olfactory lobe is nothing but it is a swollen bulb. It is a swollen bulb anteriorly and an olfactory tract which runs posteriorly. So anteriorly it looks like a bulb, and posteriorly it looks like a tract that is running through. Okay, and it connects to the olfactory area of the cerebrum. The olfactory bulbs are connected to the sensory area of the nose through olfactory nerves, and they are concerned with cells. So we'll just write this part also of the cerebrum down, because this comes in the cerebrum only. Let's continue with this. We did functions of cerebrum. Then we can say that the olfactory lobes, or the olfactory lobes, which are also called as the Ryan, which is also called as the Rhenencephalon. Right? Now, the pair of olfactory lobes are incorporated. Pair of olfactory lobes are incorporated. Pair of olfactory lobes are incorporated with the cerebrum on the ventral side. Right? Each olfactory lobe has a swollen bulb anterior. Each olfactory lobe has a swollen bulb anteriorly and an olfactory tract posteriorly, which runs posteriorly, to connect to the olfactory area of the cerebrum. Connect to the olfactory area of cerebrum. Fine. The olfactory bulbs are connected to the sensory cells of the nose. Olfactory bulbs are connected to the sensory cells of the nose. Through olfactory nerves. Right? They are concerned with the sense of smell. So, in this lecture, what we've seen is, we've seen the cerebrum. The cerebrum is made up of the different areas. It is first of all divided into two hemispheres. Each hemisphere has a cavity which is called as parasol. Then the two hemispheres are joined together by corpus callosum. It is made up of cerebral cortex and cerebral medulla. Cortex is the grey matter, medulla is the white matter. It has ridges and depressions. Ridges are called as gyri, depressions are called as sulci. There are three main depressions which divide the cerebrum into four lobes, which are the central sulcus, which are the central sulcus, the lateral sulcus, should be somewhere here, the lateral sulcus, and the parieto-occipital sulcus, right, which gives rise to four different lobes, which are your anterior frontal lobe, the middle parietal lobe, the posterior occipital lobe, and the lateral temporal lobe. You have various sensory areas that are located in different parts of the cerebrum. Cerebrum is responsible for all voluntary activity, consciousness, as well as for all your mental faculties, right? Besides that, in cerebrum you also have the olfactory lobes, which are called as Rhenencephalon. They are present on the ventral side of the cerebrum. They look like swollen bulbs anteriorly and look like a tract which runs posteriorly. The olfactory bulbs are connected to the sensory cells of the nose and they are concerned with the sense of smell, right? So do we understand the cerebrum? Or that was the first part of the brain, that's your forebrain, right? Okay, we'll stop this here for the day. We'll continue with this in the next lecture. Thank you very much.